Very good. Call the meeting to order. Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none.
Heavens no.
Sorry?
Heavens no.
Heavens no. There's no room.
Please.
Madam.
Thank you, Worship. First item are adoptions of the minutes of the Council Committee meeting held Monday, July 15th. The recommendation is that
Really wants to move this along.
Yeah.
Brent, Neil, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 2 is a delegation from Ms. Joan, Chair of the Joint Family Court and Youth Justice Committee. She's here to provide an update of committee activities.
Ms. Isaac, we've got 2,700 items on today's agenda, so you have to do it.
But
Please take 30 seconds.
It's all good. It's all good.
Put us all on the speakers list.
Well, good afternoon, Your Worship and council members. I'm the chair of the Joint Family Court and Youth Justice Committee, and appreciate you receiving us today just to give you a brief update of the activities that we've been doing on the committee. Your Worship, we've just prepared a brief presentation just to go over some of our talking points, our mandate, some of the activities over the past year, our upcoming community forum in October, some of the challenges and the proposed amendments to the terms of reference. So just starting with the mandate, this is just a couple of the bullet points from our terms of reference, but I want to go over them because we do have a pretty full mandate to achieve. So we are to provide information and educate the public on issues that are related to family court and issues that are related to youth justice issues. We consider, examine, and review changes that pertain to family court and also to crime prevention issues. We increase our community's visibility within the community so that we could be recognized as an appropriate body to whom recommendations could be proposed. We review and analyze legislation, policies, and programs, and make recommendations to the court and to the Attorney General. So we do have a fairly big mandate to fulfill. Starting off with our activities last year, of course, we had our bullying community forum in October. We partnered with Red Cross to show a film documentary as well as 2 YouTube videos. We assembled a panel of 7 members who were all experts in their field, and they provided information and education to the public on issues surrounding bullying. With over 400 people there, it was impossible to respond to all of the questions from the audience. We really wanted it to be much more interactive, but we did want to respond to the concerns of the community, and so we launched a bullying prevention series, which ran from January to March, and kind enough for the City of Coquitlam to host our first session with introductions by Mayor Stewart. We also did a marijuana forum. Is it time for a new approach? Very lively and interesting discussion on whether or not marijuana could be legalized or decriminalized. Once again, we had a 3-panel member come to talk to us and our audience about this type of issue, whether crime might increase, whether crime might decrease, whether it would start gang activities, diminish gang activities, everything to do with a safe community. And we also had a very comprehensive recommendation report, which we submitted to municipalities, to the Attorney Generals, the MPs, and the MLAs. Coming up in October, we have the changes in family law. Again, we have a 3-member panel coming to discuss proposed topics of divorce, divorce coaching, challenges to co-parenting, challenges to housing situations, visitation challenges, and of course grandparents' rights for visitation, and cohabitating, and what the legal implications are to cohabitating. So all very relevant to our work with family court. Our challenges have been due to absenteeism mainly, and to deal with that, we drafted a code of conduct which would give us some professional guidelines that the committee could work with. All the members of the committee contributed to it, and we've adopted it and signed it last Thursday. But the real concrete things, of course, come in the terms of reference, and so we need to make some further changes there, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But also our challenge has been support from the municipalities, and whether or not the municipalities changed the termination of term of office to attendance, so 3 consecutive meetings or attend 7 out of 10 meetings through the year. The term of appointment was not in the terms of reference, and we felt that there needed to be a maximum to how long a committee member could be on the committee. So we chose 6 years or 3 consecutive terms. And of course, in your committee work, you know that there's importance to have new committee members coming to committees to fill up vacancies, to bring new ideas, their network of professionals and so on. So that was part of the reason behind that. We did present to Port Moody in July 9th. Port Moody did pass our 2 recommendations at that time, but they also had 5 other amendments for consideration. The committee met on Thursday, and we have 5 more recommendations, so you haven't got that yet, and that I'm sure is on its way to you. So there are some further amendments to come. But briefly, that is where we are today and where we're going.
Wonderful. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And when I say 30 seconds, I mean because we want to be able to say how much we appreciate the work that committees like yours do, that we know it's volunteerism and it's there's a tremendous role for your committee and the work that you do. So thanks so much on behalf of all the council.
Thank you. Any questions?
I see none.
We watch for the new amendment.
That's right. Yeah. We will watch with keen interest. Thank you.
Item 2 is a report regarding the proposed city of Coquitlam liquor licensing policy. We have introductory comments by our general manager of planning and development and city council.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and council members. We have here today is a proposed approach for a city of Coquitlam liquor licensing policy. This report was prepared by my department, the city clerks, Jay and Perry, were involved, along with the assistance of a consultant who's done the labor and research for us. Just very briefly, council is aware that we received a number of liquor licensing application referrals through the council in the past year. In fact, that number seemed to have been increasing of late. And at times, the council has been a little challenged in receiving and reviewing them in the absence of some policy framework. And so, and they have been deferred pending preparation of a policy in this area. I'll come back to that in a few minutes. So what we're suggesting to assist council in receiving and reviewing and hopefully reaching decisions when it's back to the LCLP is a policy framework. And what we want to do today is check in with the committee. There's a lot of information in the report. We have some discussion and some feedback that we can then take away and work on the policy framework as well as doing some consultation. The report, as I said, is quite comprehensive. It's a little lengthy, sort of that, but there's a lot of information in there. And so what we thought is to really assist council in helping in this area, going into some of the background of the range of liquor license types, and where those existing businesses are in Coquitlam, their locations, their hours of operation, and such. Also, we touch in the report on the role or respective roles that local government can take in this area. And we also checked with some of our municipal neighbors, Port Moody, Coquitlam, Burnaby, and Surrey, just to see how they approach the whole area of the licensing policy that's set out there. So have that as a reference. With that background in mind, also recognizing we feel are somewhat unique factors or characteristics in Coquitlam. We're suggesting a draft policy approach tries to strike a balance between giving some guidance, clarity, but at the same time provide some flexibility for council to consider applications on their own merit as necessary. So, so we're hoping to get some feedback today. I think Jamie has some comments as well. And if the committee feels comfortable we're on the right track, what we'd like to do is go out and do some consultation, business stakeholders, LCLP, our RSMP and the general public over the next 2 months. First, there's 2 months because we're now getting into the August break, but with the idea of do that in a focused, effective way, and be back to council hopefully in late September, so we can meet the deadline for the response back on referrals, or a fairly minor extension to that referrals. Jay, do you have anything else?
Sure, just a few comments, and Jim basically covered the broad range of considerations. I think the city is changing. We went many years with receiving no applications for amendment or new licenses. That's obviously changed as the city changes. And I think that also just speaks to a dynamic environment overall. The policy changes from the province are ongoing. They've radically revamped, and they continue to tinker with their own liquor licensing policy, and that has an impact on the city as well. And just to round out where we landed was we believe we currently have a robust public consultation process, but I think what we're lacking to some extent, and what council pointed to, was council does not have an umbrella of policy in which to analyze the feedback that has been received, and then we think this is the first step towards that.
Okay. I've got Craig, Brent, Lou, May. Craig.
You know, I was really happy to see this report, because I remember when the last application came forward, and I was one of the people that sort of said, what have we done in the past, where we're going, and you know, and I think at the time I used the comment that we've been currently setting policy based on one application at a time, and it was very ad hoc. So I was really happy to sort of see that, you know, that we can get some, I think the way it's laid out, where we can see what we've got, and, you know, and there is still some variance between different groups, but I think that this is an excellent time for us to look at doing this, because the city is changing, and I think we can expect to get more of these applications. And so I think, you know, yes, we can't go maybe back and change some of them, but we have a chance to really set a policy. And for me as a counselor who has to make these decisions, I really appreciate having some guidance and having some standardization. And I realize it's going to be a problem, because you want to have sort of standardization. You want to treat everybody fairly, especially in business. You want to have a level playing field. At the same time, we recognize that not all districts in the city are equal. We do want to create a vibrant entertainment area. I don't know quite where that is. Maybe it is going to be here, and how we're going to deal with that. And at the same time, you have to respect the residential neighborhoods and the people who live near these. So I think it's fair for them. I also think for people that are going forward in businesses, for businesses who are going forward with these applications, that it will give them an idea of where the benchmark is, where the starting point is, what's outside of the box. Because this is an expensive and a lengthy process for them. And it gives them some guidance as to what's council's appetite going to be, what's the read going to be. So I think that's helpful for the business owners as well. I do like the fact that we still have a really good public consultation process. I know other communities where they just sort of say, oh, go down to LCMB, and they get down there, and then the residents don't get to have the local input. And I have been through this now on the other side of this application. It is very frustrating when you don't have that ability as a citizen to have input in what's going on in your community. So I think that that part of that is really good. The one part that really struck me in all of this is the good neighbor policy. And I was really interested in what Surrey had done, and I really want to see us do the good neighbor policy, because I think that's what sets the benchmark as to how we're going to coexist between business and residences when we move forward with these applications. I was curious, though, that I saw that we weren't looking at doing anything around patios. I noticed that some communities do I think patios have to shut down at 10 p.m. 7 days a week, and that they have, if they're within, I think it was at 100 meters of a residential area. I didn't see that. I mean, it is a lengthy report. Maybe I missed it, but I caught it on what some of our neighbors are doing. So I was interested in that. And the other question I had is, in my short time on council, we've had a number of applications for patron participation, and I didn't see any sort of standardization or anything around those. Is that because we don't have many, or I'm just sort of wondering why everything here seemed to be centered around hours and hours of operation, but not around the patron, and that's one of the requests that we get. I'm just wondering if you could comment on that and the patio.
Patios are a good question, and that's something I know, and maybe some of you have heard, City of Vancouver has actually been looking at that very recently. I think it came before their council last week even, about the nature of patios and the impact that they would have in a residential, especially a high-rise neighborhood. So it is something that we did talk about. We thought we would take a look at that through the consultation process here back and report back further. We're not unaware of it, is what I would say. With regard to patron participation, I think there's a number of different variables there. There's difference between karaoke nights versus dine and dance, and maybe some different considerations will come into play there. Some of the things that we've learned is patron participation travels with the license, and it's a patron participation endorsement, not a song and dance endorsement versus a karaoke endorsement. We did see a fair bit of reporting about the ethnic makeup of the city, and in many of those communities, karaoke is part of their entertainment evening or milieu. So that is something that we're going to take a look at. It's very hard to say yes or no when that's something that you may support a dine and dance here, but maybe not a karaoke bar there. It's hard to have more prescriptive, standardized policies.
So you think that may still be more on an individual case-by-case as opposed to a guiding
I
policy?
think that's part of the flexibility that the report talks about, that council wants to remain involved and wants to hear back and wants to hear some of that feedback. The RCMP has offered their opinion on karaoke establishments, so.
Okay.
But certainly, and this is what we're looking for today, is a sort of feedback. So obviously we haven't hit all the bases 100% with this, so these are things we'll take back, we'll have a look at. As Jay said, through the consultation process, we explore that a little bit more, and then we'll come back to council. We'll come back with more information in this regard. So.
No, I'm really pleased that the council will be involved in these decisions, because that means that the citizens of Coquitlam are involved in these decisions. And I really like the fact that we're moving, and hopefully this gets accepted, that we're moving forward to giving us a sort of a template or a standardized starting point. I think that's really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Brent?
Well, thank you. I like the report. I think it's a good starting point. I think, being on council for a while now, we've had this issue come up a couple of times. I think having a policy, as this one's a good starting point. I think as we go along, we will add to it and massage that thing. The issue has always been there's a dispute between pub owners and restaurants and the blurring of the lines in that area and the ability of restaurants to become quasi-pubs. So what I've seen in here and what I like, there is a slight distinction in hours to try to deal with that issue. And so I appreciate that. That's one of the parts I really like, is that we're still saying to pubs that you have a little later long, restaurants you do have to shut down a bit earlier, which is a nice distinction. So because we want to try to keep a distinction between the two. I like the fact that we have a robust policy now of consultation. I like the fact that I don't want to go to a blanket like some cities saying, yeah, all restaurants in this, no matter what location you are, you can be open at this time. What we're saying is similar to our policy now. We'll still bring to council all the information, depending on the site specific. So if you take a restaurant that's on Barnett Highway with businesses all around it, compared to a restaurant or pub that's right in a neighborhood or up. So we will still be able to make that finer judgment, which I really like. And I think that's important for council, important for the neighborhoods. So I think cities where you have a blanket policy, like when I read in the report here, you start winding up with a lot of problems within the neighborhood after the fact. And you really can't change things after the fact. As the report stated, we have to deal with some of the closing times that are in existence now. I will go back to Councillor Hodges' issue. I really like the good neighbor policy. I think it gives our enforcement staff a better way to deal with problematic people by saying, well, you've signed this, you know what we expect, this is what we want to do, so we can better enforce. So I like the policy. I think, as you said, it's going out for more consultation. I think the patios are an issue that we will need to look at as we move forward. They're a great source of entertainment and enjoyment by people, but depending on the location. I think if we talked before, if you have a patio at the Keg, just on that corner with an industrial area, if you left it open until midnight, it's not really going to affect somebody compared to have a patio outside a residential or the densified area in here. There's a difference. So I think, once again, with this format, we can distinguish between those two areas and work with that. So, no, I think it's going to help applicants and us as council better deal with this. So I thank you for taking the time, and I like the report.
Good. Thank you. Lou?
Yeah, to me, I think there has to be a standard. And to me, I don't care. A restaurant is a restaurant. I don't care where it is. You cannot discriminate. Okay, one, because they might be in a different area or whatever. It's not up to us to really, manage these places. It's up to the management and the owners to manage the place. I don't think for 1 minute that we should put a government in everybody's business. I think the less government, the better off we all are. And very simple. I notice here that there's some frightening figures here. There's Planet Ice, 2 a.m. Red Robinson, 2 a.m. Vancouver Golf Club, 2 a.m. Westwood Plateau, which is a golf course also, only till 1 a.m. So there's discrimination right there. 2 different golf courses. One at Westwood Plateau and one at the Vancouver Golf Club. One of them till 2 a.m., one of them till 1 a.m. You have here Executive Plaza till 2:30 a.m. See, you got the Executive Plaza again to 2 a.m. You have the Great Canadian Casino 2 a.m. And I see nothing wrong with the casino being till 2 a.m. John B. Pub, only pub at 2 a.m. What is that? Discrimination. It's the worst kind. See? So, what I'm saying is what I said a few months ago, and I'll say it again. There has to be a policy set for restaurants. But those restaurants are open here for 24 hours a day. Okay, so why should they cut off the liquor at 11 a.m.? So I think there should be a policy of restaurants till 1 a.m., pubs, and everything else till 2 a.m. And just because something, we're going to have a mismatch of policies throughout this community if we do anything different. And I've been a businessman. I've been in hotel, restaurant business, and pub business, so I know what I'm talking about. And to me, I think that you have to set a policy. How can John B. Pub be till 2 a.m. and yet Woody's and Town Hall and Two Parrots Pub and Rhinos and everybody else is till 12 midnight or 1 a.m. or whatever it is? I think it's very, very unfair. See, like Charlie's Pub here till midnight, and you can go on and on and on. And Coquitlam Convention Inn. I mean, they got a lounge in there, not a pub but a lounge. The closing time at 1 a.m. I think, Mayor, we need a policy. And I don't think that we need 20 different policies. And I know that we have policies with patios. Every lounge and everybody has a patio. I think on a complaint basis, you deal with them. I mean, you get a complaint, you deal with them. And if the management is good, you're not going to have any problems. If the management is bad, like we used to have the Steel Monkey up the street here, with the column in to say to them the license is gone. Because they have fights every night, and didn't matter what time they close it, they have fights in the parking lot, fights inside, all over the place. So those were the great problems. So, but I think, look, we're now in an era where people may want to, people work until midnight. If he wants to go home and be a lone kind of drinker, that's the most dangerous thing in the world, to be a lone kind of drinker. If he wants to go to a pub and have a beer before he goes home, I see nothing wrong with that. I see nothing. I'm not going to have 3 or 4 to where he's driving impaired or anything else. But I think we need to got to have a standard, no discrimination, and a policy, and everybody follows the policy. And I think that's the best way to go.
Okay, well, that's the title of the report, is developing a policy. So, Jim.
Thank you, Your Worship. Agreed, and that's...
We don't have a policy.
In preparing the draft and having the discussions of policy. Because you've got to recognize a few things. That over time, these various businesses and councils have been approved with licensing. So we're seeing the accretion of 20, 30 years of decisions made. So
it's the mid-'80s.
It's a history that's built up over time. And obviously, we try to be clear on the point. We can't retroactively go back and impair those businesses. So, but looking forward, what is a reasonable balance? And that's what we've tried to provide in the policy. Is one hand, provide some guidance, but also at the same time, reserve for council that ability to differentiate. I don't say it's discriminate, but to differentiate based on location. That's what staff recommend, is for council to decide. The complaint basis, that's a good point too, is that would be the sort of thing that where an application is coming forward to amend the business, the hours of operation or whatever. One of the sources would be checking with RCMP and bylaw enforcement to see just how that business is performed at that time, and their complaints. Are they compliant or not? And that too should be part of the operations.
No, I would just support that. There is obviously a genealogy to all of these times, and some of that's set by city decisions, some by provincial decisions, and some actually I would suggest, although I don't know from looking at them, by the decisions of the businesses themselves, determining what is the best business investment for them to be open at this hour versus that hour, and what works for their clientele. So I think there's a variety of factors that will be teased out through the public consultation process. But I do believe, like Jim said, there's some differentiation across the city that may be appropriate. The council will always have the flexibility through the recommended policy to come to the right decision as they see it for that area.
Okay, May.
I'll be quick. I don't need to tell you the background, you all know it. Food primary versus liquor primary. I'm very concerned in that the liquor primary has a lot of pretty stringent rules to go by. Food primary does not. For someone who wants to open up an establishment, they can just go and get a food primary license. That's real easy. What concerns me is some of the chain restaurants that are coming in that really want to be pubs, but it's much easier to get a food primary license and party hardy. Those are the ones that I'm concerned about because they also have large seating capacity and large patios and yada yada. So I'm really concerned about those. I wanted to talk about the patron participation as well. Now, it travels with the license, but what I'm wondering is if in Coquitlam's guidelines, if we could never give out a patron participation with a license, our patron participation, could it be tied to our zoning or our occupancy, or could it be tied to the business license instead of being tied to the liquor license? And the reason I'm asking that way we would have control over it. And also, for the benefit of the business person, they wouldn't have to go back and go through the whole gamut with Victoria again. Our business license would say that you can have a karaoke bar or you can't. And that's where the business license would be. And it would be tied to location is what I'm trying to get at. I'm trying to figure an easier way to do this. So.
That's a challenging question.
Well, I don't know. I'm just trying, it's a suggestion. You're looking for suggestions. That's one of them. I'm just trying to do that. You don't need to answer because you're going to go and do all that. Music and dancing, same thing. Any of that patron participation, I'm wondering if we can tie to the business license or the zoning instead of just giving somebody something and then they move to where they really wanted to be in the first place. As long as there's a big distinction between the food and liquor primary, I'm okay. RCMP, I think I really want to make sure that I hear not only about the pubs and the problems, but the food primary as well and the problems that we have. Thank you, I'm done.
Thank you. So next, the big May just said as long as there's a big distinction between the food primary and liquor primary, the challenge that we got is that there isn't any distinction. Right now, we've got the food primary block from City Hall here that's a pub, essentially. It's designed like it, the original Joe's. We know the ones, Boston Pizza. They're pubs in their design, pubs that allow children in because they're actually a family restaurant, some of them. And yet they act in every way like a pub or a liquor primary after about 8 o'clock at night. Now, maybe that's fine. But unfortunately, our public policy hasn't caught up with that because those are situated across from elementary schools. Those are situated throughout our community. And we have a rule about location of liquor primary that would restrict quite heavily the location that you'd be able to choose to put a pub, and for a lot of good public policy reasons. I'm struggling with that. I don't have any issue whatsoever with the idea that we set a different different types of criteria depending on location, depending on any number of things. We just had a debate about 2 months ago about whether a pub that's not on any kind of bus route at all might actually be treated differently, or a pub that's in a residential neighborhood being treated differently from one that's in an industrial neighborhood, related to hours of operation, because clearly hours of operation affect residential neighbors a lot more than they affect commercial or industrial neighbors. So I don't have the same kind of concern that another council member has about that. I think we owe it to neighbors, and ultimately this is about keeping the neighborhood whole related to these. We owe it to neighbors to manage those externalities really carefully. Neighbors don't want to be next to a pub, many of them. And they certainly don't want to be next to one that's open till 2 in the morning. If that's not something that's within our purview, then I don't know what is. I think we should be allowed to set those kinds of rules depending on what the neighborhood thinks to some degree. And if you're going to allow the neighborhood to have some thoughts on that subject, you have to be able to respond. And obviously you can't respond if we simply say every restaurant is this and every pub is that, because then there's no point even consulting with the neighborhood. You've just told them that it doesn't matter what they think. It only matters that that business wants to call itself a restaurant, and therefore it's allowed to do the following things. I think we need to be more specific than that, and I look forward to the development of a policy with public input that gets us there. Terry.
Yeah, thanks. I sometimes get frustrated with the long process that leads up to development of firm policies. But in this case, this is a really good process. I think the report sets up as a good starting point with a lot of good ideas in it. And it's a good framework, kind of focusing, but not focusing too tightly. The clerk talked about how this was an umbrella of policy. I think it's more of a prism or a lens of policy that's not focused so tightly that it generates a lot of heat right now. It's not going to start any fire. It's still a wide focus. So that's good. So I think sort of one of the most important parts of this report is the next steps. This is the process part, where we're going to actually go out and talk to the people who have the licenses, talk to the public, talk to the police, all that sort of stuff. So I think that's really important. And so I don't have a lot of opinion on this myself that I want to interject. I'm really happy to see this tightening up of and then bring it to the public and all the different interested parties. And then I'll wait final determination when we hear back from everybody else. Thank you.
Neil.
Thanks. Well, Terry's right. It's a long process, but it's a good process, and it has to take the time that it needs. But I'm a little bit concerned about the applications that we have that have been deferred. And then my first thing was I don't remember doing that, and I think what happened is we just said we're not going to look at any until we've done this work. So anything that came in after sometime in February got deferred.
That's correct.
There are 2 categories. There's 2 applications for new licenses and 3 applications to change hours. The applications to change hours don't concern me nearly as much as the applications for new licenses, because here people are in the midst of making business decisions, trying to move forward with economic development and all kinds of wonderful stuff. And they've been waiting, when they came in sometime after February, and I don't know how long ago. But I'm wondering whether, over all the years, we've dealt with these one by one. What we're trying to do today and over the next couple of months is to build the policy framework that will make it easier for us to deal with them. But I wonder, as that goes forward, whether at least the 2 new license applications should be dealt with by us, whether we should look at them, give them some guidance. I don't know what their planning is. I don't know how long their timeline is. If they're in situations where they don't even need to know until December, then it wouldn't matter. But if it would help, I think we need to encourage business, to encourage people who are trying to do things in the city, not leave them in uncertainty for any longer than we have to. But raise that as a possibility, and maybe staff could consider it and bring us back something if there's a way to do it. Mr. Gilbert wants to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think that the two new licenses, one is the Cactus Club on Schoolhouse, and what they're looking for is to sever their existing all-encompassing primary and make their lounge liquor primary, and that would allow them to have different hours and stuff like that. So the establishment is in operation. That being said, it's a change, and Douglas
But
College.
it's more like the second category of change where they're looking for changes to hours.
I would suggest that is.
That's the
true.
ultimate objective.
Yeah. The second one is, I think, a student pub, and students return in September. However, we just felt that we had been deferring and holding back on other applications pending the policy review. That was our promise to the LCLB, and putting one forward at the expense of others we felt was providing, maybe not an unfair advantage, but treating them differently. And,
Okay, well, that additional background, students will always find a place.
Yeah, this is an emergency.
Yeah, sorry, I got clarification, because Kerry seemed to the Douglas College is not a pub, it's part of their existing restaurant.
It's just for when they're holding special events, because there's liability issues with the person that is always taking out the special events license, so that what they want to do is have a permanent liquor license, so that there's not.
So they're not coming for special occasion licenses.
Yeah, so they're not being held back, it's just they're having to deal with more bureaucracy. I think that's something that we're dealing with within our own facilities, and
And I think that deals with the point I raised. And the only other one I would make is that I think it's absolutely appropriate for us to have the ability to vary opening and closing times and various other conditions depending on neighborhood, kind of operation, and all that kind of thing. So look forward to that.
I believe staff felt the same way. We felt the
Yes, I
council
think
made
I
some.
think you did. I heard a different view here, and so I thought I'd better express mine. Thank you.
We felt that council made some wise decisions in limiting restaurant extended hours to Friday and Saturdays only, despite the application asking for more, and you'll see that reflected in the proposed policy.
Thank you.
Yeah, so what I'm saying, that, you got pubs with different hours. That is very, very unfortunate. I think they all should be the same hours. The mayor mentioned that 2 a.m. around residential areas is too much for a pub. Does that mean to say that we're going to be bringing John B. Pub and tell them after that apartment opens up right across the street that they'll have to cut their hours? Is that what we're saying? Because if you're saying,
I'm not sure what your
well,
point
you
is.
mentioned that you would not like to see pubs serving till 2 a.m. in the morning, okay, around residential area.
No, I said,
Yeah,
No, I
you
said
mentioned
you-
that comment. You made that comment, okay?
Okay, no,
Now, if it's true, that means that what you're going to have to do is when that apartment block opens across the street from John B. Pub, that they'll have to cut their hours because they're now going till 2 a.m. So, but to me, there's
John B
gotta
is right
be-
next to residential
Pardon?
already. John B is right next to residential, and I said that it's okay to apply a different standard based on whether it's near residential or near industrial or whatever, and any number of factors. But I didn't say a prohibition on 2 o'clock near residential, particularly residential that came after the pub, because they knew the pub was there, so. Well, they know there's a pub there.
Maybe that's what they bought.
So what you're saying, that if a residential came after a fact, if there's a pub built and there's a whole bunch of residentials opened up around it, that the pub is going till 2 o'clock in the morning, so come hell or high water, they'll be serving liquor till 2 o'clock in the morning. That's what you're saying. So,
Well, it applies to airports. People move in next to an airport, they don't get the airport to close. Jim?
Just along those lines, thoughts come up later. When we look at the plans for these areas, and we're on to later this year or the next year, is the city center area plan. And I know we've talked about like an entertainment precinct or district, so I think that's the sort of thing that within the framework of the neighborhood plan or area plan, you look at that, or maybe some design guidelines, some locational policy that can apply in those areas to help alleviate or mitigate the possible conflicts between, if we are going to get residential, commercial, close juxtaposition within the city center. But there's some policy that helps in dealing with that. So we look at.
Move receipt of the report.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Councilor O'Neill.
Item 4 is a report regarding Mundy Park Forest Management Plan Task Group, and we have introductory comments by our acting general manager.
Move recommendation.
Second.
Recommendation is to receive. It's been moved by Councillor Rasmussen, seconded by Councillor Hodge. Mr. Holder.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, members of council. Just a brief introduction. Our report was brought forward on this issue on March 11th. Some of the feedback council has provided was to provide a little broader input than the three recreation, two environmental groups proposed. Unfortunately, there was a bit of a delay in coming forward with this report. Our manager in charge of this was seconded to our park planning and design. So now that he's back in position, we want to move this forward. This group is really a task group with a specific purpose to help out with the forest management plan. And just by way of reminder, that scope of that plan includes forest health, tree risk management, recreation management, invasive species management, wildfire fuel management, forest succession, nature-based education, and human-wildlife conflicts. So we certainly would like to get council's feedback on too little, too much, or any thoughts you may have on this before staff.
Okay. Myself and three council members already. My concerns, I actually think this is incredibly important. This is a jewel in Coquitlam. I've lived all my life near Mundy Park, and it is magnificent and in every way worth cherishing and worth protecting. And I look at the title of it. Of course, it's a Forest Management Plan Task Group. So I'm wondering how we ended up with the matrix that we ended up with. We have pushed over the recent years to move our advisory committees, and this is an advisory committee, short-term one, move our advisory committees from the idea of having a focus group of interested, curious individuals, then more toward having a group of people who can advise, can give advice, who are qualified. And so I look at some of the naturalist groups that are listed here as being very valuable to the development of the forest management plan. I look at perhaps the fire department as being quite valuable because the fuel load of that forest keeps me awake at night sometimes. But I don't know about the Frisbee guys because I don't know the valuable input that they'll be able to give on tree health and forest management and arborist kinds of issues. So I don't know how the matrix made it this way. Not saying anything against Frisbee guys.
I think the goal was to acknowledge all of the current active user group, and the Frisbee guys, the disc golf course actually goes into the forest itself. So there's an important a thought that it would be important for them to understand how their activity intersects with the health of the forest, as well as the other groups that are currently, we have a lot of dog walkers, the animal shelter volunteers we're seen to represent that.
Yep,
And the most
I saw that.
important thing is for all those people with completely different perspectives to hear the technical information we get from the consultants as one, and then understand that the sweet spot is going to be recognizing that for the health of the forest, there's going to be moderation of all of that. The goal at the end of the day is to have a resilient forest, and that means we are going to assume some limitations on some particular direction around how we operate the forest.
No, I understand that, and I looked at and the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee, for example. Undoubtedly, there's elements of the use of the park, not the health of the forest, but the use of the park that are multicultural. And so the Coquitlam Sharks uses the park, but they're not really involved in the health of the forest. So I guess that's the distinction I was trying to wrestle with. So I'm sure if you posted in Coquitlam, you'd end up with several people who spent all summer fighting forest fires, for example, or managing fire risks in particularly interface areas. Those skills, that experience and knowledge is something that I would find invaluable here, and much more than the input of user groups such as disc golf or whatever. I recognize they have a stake in it, but I don't know that they have the ability to give us much advice. So that was my hope. In the end, I want this to go forward as on a scientific a basis as possible, because at the end of it we have to produce a supportable plan that everyone can get behind so that we can protect that forest from the kinds of risks that we've seen completely destroy forest amenities in every other community. Well, we see it every day in North America now. So, okay. Neil.
Thank you. Well, although the, under composition in the terms of reference, it says the task group is an advisory body, but I don't see it as an advisory body in the sense that most of our committees are advisory committees to council. I think the idea here is to get people who use the park, who are impacted by the park, who will have an opportunity to put their hand up and say, if that's where you think you're going to go, if this is the kind of principles that you're going to need to put into place to protect the forest, you need to appreciate that that will impact my use this way, and give the staff the opportunity to consider all those things, and the consultants, people who are saying this is how you create a healthy forest. It's perhaps one of the best ways to create a healthy forest is to say nobody go in there, go away, leave it alone, and then if it becomes unhealthy, you won't notice, so that'll be okay. So I think I appreciate the reasons behind the first half dozen, and then we have 4 advisory committees to council: arts, culture, multiculturalism, sustainability, environmental, and universal accessibility, and they all have something to contribute, I think, to, again, to look at whether forming an active management plan for the forest will have some impact on something elsewhere in the community, or on their part of the community's approach. My reaction, and this is not usual, 10 members is lots to have around the table, but I think there's a couple of people missing, and the first 2 I would say are a couple of just residents, people who weren't on a committee, weren't part of a group, just live near the park, just are interested. They want to be there. They want to have a chance to put up their hand. They're, as many, I think, park users, they don't belong to any group. They just go and enjoy it. That'll slow things down because now clerks will have to advertise and they'll have to go through a process to pick people. But nonetheless, I think a couple of people like that should be there. And then across the city's advisory committees, the glaring absence is the Sport Council, which represents all sport users, many of whom, again, even if the important message is soccer fields are not going to get any bigger. The forest is the forest, and it's not going to change. So that's my suggestion, and I'll perhaps hear what everybody else has to say before I make a motion or anything to do anything like that.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're on the list. I've acknowledged you, and I've got Craig May in the.
Yeah, and I agree with Councilman Nicholson. I was going to say the exact same things. I think that, as somebody who grew up near Mundy Park, I know that there are people who are interested in the park who don't belong to a group other than the group of people who love Mundy Park and want to see it protected for the future generations. So I think that's an important group of people. And I agree. I think it's difficult because there are sports groups that use the park. Some the peripheral side, the edge of the park, some right in the park. But to me, the encompassing body is the Sport Council, and I think this is a role that we want. We've got the other advisory committees on there, and I think that sort of is a natural fit with the others. In terms of where we're going with this, I think this is about forest and asset management, and I think compromises are going to have to be made, and I think this is what this is about. This is a forest, an area that is under pressure because our city is growing, and we are growing around that important piece of forest, and the community that's around that forest today is very different than the community that I grew up in, and it's almost like it's just pushing on all sides, and you can feel the pressure on that land. And I think we have to figure out how do we manage that pressure, how do we protect the trees, but at the same time recognize that the citizens of the city and our surrounding neighbors want to be able to use and enjoy that park. And that's where the compromise comes in, is what is best practice for a forest and what is best practice for a community trying to use that forest. And I think that's where we have to decide is how do we coexist? How do we protect the trees, and at the same time, how do we manage to allow people to enjoy that forest? And I think there's some balancing that's going to have to be found there. And I look forward to the work that the committee and the task force is going to do. I know that because of staffing issues and because of the heavy workload that we placed on your department, this was a little later getting going than we would like. But I want to make sure that we don't rush the process. You know, that we do it right and that we give this committee time to do its work, to have the meetings that they need to have, and because I think this is valuable work, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they come up with. Thank you.
May?
Thank you. As the mayor said, having this as a forest management plan, to me that it could take in many different segments, but for me it takes in what is the health of the forest. And so the health of the forest, I think you've got some folks on the committee that can talk to us about that. But I do want our folks, our staff, involved. And along with the health of the forest, then I need to know what fire thinks. I need to know what RCMP thinks. I need to know what bylaw thinks. And most importantly, for staff, I need to know what Drake Stevens thinks of all our wilderness and the little critters that I love so much, because they're a big part of the forest. And speaking about critters, I'm also quite concerned about two things. There are bike clubs that go in there. I don't see them on here, and they cause a lot of havoc, along with the commercial dog walkers. And that, I think, is an absolute no-no. You're only allowed to have 3 dogs in any household in Coquitlam, so if you're walking more than 3, I'm not interested. Usually, several of them are off doing stuff they're not supposed to be doing, which includes chasing wildlife, so I don't like that. The other part that we're missing here is the youth. And the youth kindly built us something up in Mundy Park that some other youth tore down. So I'm going to take this committee, and I would, a committee like this, I would have sections of it. I would have a big committee, and then I would break it off almost into subcommittees, where staff, I guess one of you, would take care of getting all the necessary staff reports on good ideas and whatever. And I would like to see someone get perhaps our youth committee going, and youth could start talking to some of the secondary schools and high schools or whatever to see what they could come up with about Mundy Park, how we could best protect it and everyone could get using it. And bylaws we certainly want to hear about. And then Drake Stevens. So I would take this committee and actually try and get a little bit of everything, and not just have it on the health of the forest, but actually the health of the youth. And I think you might be able to do it very nicely by having a head committee and then maybe having a few little subcommittees in the different sections. Thank you.
Thank you. Lou?
Yeah, thank you. I noticed you put a price of $60,000. Is that to put the process through a study, or where does that $60,000 fit in?
That's a placeholder number that we haven't tested against the market yet. We're going to go out and hire consultants who have to do the hydrology, soil quality, the recommendations related to technical forest health, and then the assumption is that we'll also do public education, open houses, and part of the reason why we need a really robust task group is to help us make sure that we hit the right notes as we consult the community as well. But at this point, we haven't gone to tender. We don't know exactly. We know that's the ceiling placeholder for that project.
And you know, I think, you know what, if we looked, you know, I know you got this task force that you think will do a great job, but I think you need to go, you know, if you were to phone the general public that use that Mundy Park, which are thousands and thousands and thousands of people, they're not lined up with any of these committees or any of these people. I think you'll say, you know what they'll say? Leave it alone. It's been there for 100-some-odd years, and nature takes its place, looks after it and everything. All of a sudden, we come up with a bright idea that somehow it needs managing. How did it exist for the last 100 years? Or whatever, or more than 100 years? How did it exist?
Your Worship, maybe I could answer it this way. First, there will be, First, there will be public consultation will be part of this. This task group has a specific purpose, as Ms. Reinheimer had mentioned before. Secondly, the forest itself is under more pressure. It's under more pressure for more use. There's more activities around, as Councillor Hodge had stated. The environment around the forest has changed. And this is intended to, first and foremost, to provide a preservation and enhancement of the forest to ensure that it does last a little bit.
How Stanley Park exists? They're not going through a whole bunch of studies and
Funny you should mention.
I know you can laugh as much as you want, but I'll tell you, there's the Parks Board that looks after it, that's right, but they sure as hell don't do the studies that we're going to get a certain group to do a study, because I'll tell you what, I don't think for 1 minute this group is very, very good, but I don't think for 1 minute that you'll come up with end all and be all on how to manage that Mundy Park, and we don't have the things in our park that Stanley Park has, by far. Mundy Park is a forest, and there's some playgrounds there that baseball, softball, and other sports are being using it on the outskirts of it, or just on the borders of it. But inside, there's nothing in Mundy Park aside a forest and some lakes and a few other things that are natural. And I'll tell you something. I don't know why, but I understand. You know what? Government comes into the city, and the government wants to be into everything, and that's the problem. We stick our noses into everything that is possibly that we need to study. We need, there's a tree growing over there, we need to study it. There's a rock in there, we need to study it. I mean, come on. It's got to a point where, we're just putting the government in everybody's face.
And in fairness, though, Stanley Park is studied extensively and much more, enormously more than what we're proposing here.
Different parts, 2 different parts.
Well, I didn't compare them. You're the one who compared them. So is Stanley Park undergoing some that kind of stuff?
Your Worship,
So
sir.
we're going to have good confrontation next few weeks.
No, I'm just,
I can answer.
you can answer?
I can answer. March 2009, extensive report in Stanley Park Forest Management.
Yep. I know.
I can send you the link.
I know. I actually read it.
There's these things.
Okay, is there anything else? Okay, yeah, Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thanks. In March of this year, I think, is when this first came to our committee, and at that time, we were told that the makeup of the advisory group, not task force, would be 3 recreational groups, 2 local environmental stewardship groups, and 1 neighborhood association. And actually, there's 2 neighborhood associations in the area, according to the map that we attached to the second last thing that's on our agenda late tonight or early tomorrow morning, dealing with all candidates meetings. There's a Mundy Park Community Association and a Ranch Park Community Association. I don't know how active they are. Not active at all. Okay, so I was wondering about that. So if there were an active community association, they would have been a natural for this.
That's right.
2 residents.
I
Mundy Park was at one point relatively recently, though.
Okay.
Last
all right. So they made it onto this map here right at the end of our agenda, but as community associations, but they don't exist. Okay, any real degree. I do think we want to manage the forest. And the reason we want to manage the forest is because people use it. We're not managing it for its own sake. It exists as a park. People use it, and a whole bunch of different people use it. And so, while it's, so we want to make sure it's healthy, we want to make sure it's not a big fire hazard, but not for its own sake unto itself. Because it's in the middle of the fast-growing urban area here, hardly even a suburban area anymore, and thousands of people use it perhaps daily. So, yeah, I do think we need to get a good range of input, not just environmental or fire or wildlife coordinators, but some of the users. So that's why I see the users being involved as you've laid out. I'm not sure why the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee needs to send a rep to this, though. I mean, I'm on the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee, and as the vice chair, I don't know what particular interests they would have as a user, but
Birds and bees.
no. But I can see sports groups and everything like that.
Great place to go to paint.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. So I do like the diversity of input of users, so they can lend their voice to I think Councilor Nicholson talked about the unforeseen impacts. Did you say that? He was talking about the unforeseen impacts. If we want to do all of this to protect the forest, but that's going to affect all of these people there. Well, wait a minute. So where do we find the balance? So I think that's important. Somebody else talked about getting youth involved, and perhaps this is a way to actually get a working community involvement, because Charles Best High School is right across the street. They've got an active parent advisory committee. They've got student council. There's all of that, and I'm on good terms with the principal of the high school. So I'm sure something could. Are you sure about that? Very good.
Today you are, yeah.
You may not know.
She just got back from Ecuador, so we're in really good terms.
Well, she did come back.
She came back, but she did stay in Ecuador. So anyway, so there's a natural for community group that's right nearby, the Charles Best community. As a matter of fact, 40 years ago, when the first plans were drawn up for where Charles Best, then junior high, was going to be built, there were plans to put it right across the street from where it is to the south, right in the middle of Mundy Park. And somebody far-reaching decision decided not to put it there, but I've actually seen the plan to do that. It would have been quite a loss for the community if it had gone there. So anyway, there's my suggestion. If you want community involvement, Charles Best is a good place to get.
Brent?
Well, thank you. Good comments all around. I think, when we look at, when I saw the title, and I go back to, I think, Mayor Stewart's comment, it should be Mundy Park Users and Forest Management Plan. I think you're talking about two parts to it here. I'm going to agree in what I'm glad Councilor Nixon brought up. I think there should be a couple just straight residents that are on that, because the other issue, a lot of the people that use Mundy Park, the groups listed, are conflicting interests, and we get emails quite often about groups that are wanting to exclude the other groups in the use of the park. And so there's some difficulties within that we have to also, as we go through this, manage and realize. And I think maybe part of this also bringing them to a better understanding of their roles within the park and those conflicting interests. Because I know if we get them, you're getting them way more than we are ever getting them on a regular basis. So, and I know some people in the community that are in the forest management business that would, I think, I'll say, let's give you a suggestion who I think would be a citizen. But I do think we need to round it out more on that. And I don't think it has to be stuck. We could, I think it's, Councilman, we could have 12 people on the committee without any, but I do think that sports council, and maybe by an extension, I think you should probably, rather than the sports council, maybe not as a member, but as a consultation, I think you can do with the CFSA, since they're from the sports groups, they're the largest group because they're field sports, rather than the sports council. I think it'd be good to go and have a consultation with them about the plan, their uses and stuff like that. Or they could be on the, rather than the sports council, they could be the other group that would send a member, because their people, CFSA, are the ones that are using the field. So I think they would probably be better than the sports council in their input and the use of the park. Thank you.
Thank you. I just got a couple of the last minute things I wanted to add. I mean, ultimately, a big chunk of what this is about the impact that human use and dog use actually has on the park, but primarily humans. This is invasive plants. This is by invasive plants, we don't mean plants that invade. We mean plants that people move into some place where they don't belong and they take over because we move them. And so that over the back fence kinds of stuff, the fellow that wheels down his street and goes into the bushes at the end of the street and dumps them there. Those are enormous issues, and they're human issues. We don't have to deal with the top of Eagle Mountain for a forest management point of view because we're not up there impacting the forest the kind of ways that humans impact the forest down here. I think the name Dwight is what you're talking about, is one of them.
Yep, yes. Yeah.
And I look at some of the expertise that we have in our communities about the evolution, and that was about the Durant Park, Durant Forest, which he came to council and actually spoke quite eloquently about the evolution of a forest, and a forest that is on the decline and rebuilding itself, or falling down effectively in the wind and slowly rebuilding itself over a couple of generations. So I would look to that kind of expertise if this is an advisory committee.
Yeah.
If it's a users group committee or if something else, then I'd rather it not be called an advisory committee. I'd rather it be called some kind of a stakeholders approach. And I completely agree with the Charles Best stuff. I had suggested to the principal at Charles Best and the principal at Pine Tree that there's a great big park right across from your school. We'd love to see you adopt it to some degree. And we saw Charles Best do an element in Mundy Park. I thought that was absolutely wonderful to have those high schools link in some tangible way to the park across the street from them in woodworking or in metal shop or in environmental sciences would be great. And lastly, Douglas College has a forestry program, I believe, or at least they did, and I'd love to see whether they want to perhaps take on part of this as some of the work that the college does, or perhaps for that matter, SFU or one of the other. BCRT has a large forestry management program that goes all the way out to, in fact, I was out at Woodlot 7 on the weekend speaking to a group of people at a BCIT facility in a forest managed by BCIT. So I think there's some synergies there that we could explore.
I was in Durant Forest yesterday.
And you were in Durant Forest there. Okay. Anything else? Oh, I didn't see you. No, sorry.
That's okay.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Kathleen.
Maybe Neil could go first, but I was just thinking that we could blend these two goals, change the name to a stakeholders group, and then as part of the public consultation, we could have both the staff input that's been referenced here, as well as the broader experts within the community. It was always envisioned that there would be, that the group would help interpret the technical information for the rest of the community. So that public consultation, public information would allow us to broaden the inclusion.
Okay.
And perhaps in the ongoing discussions over the time, there might be an opportunity to brief youth council, to speak to youth council, and get them aware. Observation around here is that once people are aware, we have no difficulty getting them to speak up. But I'm the one who said maybe we need a couple of just real people. And Councillor O'Neill said, I'm not sure what the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee is doing there, and I don't have a great answer for that. But it does occur to me, actually, that the 4 city advisory committees that are recited there are there not because they have some particular connection to Mundy Park, but as an easy way to find 4 citizens or residents who, at their committee meeting, would put their hand up and say, I'd like to do that, I'd like to be part of that, I'd like to have some input on that. So it may be that my suggestion that we add a couple of people to do that isn't necessary, that those committees effectively give us resident representation.
Self-select.
But that doesn't, in my mind, deal with the Sports Council question, and I would move that we add a rep from Sports Council to this committee. I'm looking for a seconder, Craig.
I'll second it. We do that as a formal
Take
motion.
that as a friendly amendment,
Yeah.
so that it doesn't
Well,
have to be
can I
forwarded
speak?
to.
Okay, we'll add you to the list, not so much to this one, because we're going to contemplate that as friendly, but only after we hear whether there's anyone's objecting to that. Is there anything else for you from your perspective?
Not unless somebody objects. Thank
Okay,
you.
we'll come back to you, I promise.
I just think it would be better if it was the CFSA, because the Sports Council is a high 30,000 guiding body, but if you're talking about the users that use the park from the sports groups, it's the CFSA. They're the ones that use it.
It's not hockey, basketball, and lawn bowling. Okay.
No.
Okay.
So that's what I think it should be.
And?
If I may, I guess I see the Sport Council as being in this role, similar to arts, culture, multiculturalism, a logical place to go to get citizen resident input. Making sure we've covered all the bases, arts, culture, so on, down through Sports Council, rather than CFSA, which does have a direct sort of connection, but there are sports groups already listed who are directly connected to the Mundy Park. So that's why I see Sport Council. Thank you.
I think that if, and I agree with Brent, we want to have them at the high level, the big level. And to me, this is the high level, being on committees and not the day-to-day stuff. It's advising on issues around sports, and they're a city committee like the Arts and Culture, the Multicultural, the Environment Committee. That's their role. We haven't gone to the arts and say, well, why don't we get the painters, because they're more like, I don't think we want to pull a group out of these other subcommittees any more than we want to pull a group out of Sport Council. So I think we want to put representation at the city council level. It may in fact actually be the same person, because we do have reps from CFSA, and that may
not
be
be, though.
but may not be, but I think that's for the committee to decide, and I think that's a good point, to have somebody from that group who's obviously more familiar with field and sports use than it is for an indoor user. I agree with you. It wouldn't make sense to have somebody from one of the indoor sports on there. But I have to say, I think they should be represented as a civic advisory committee.
I'm sorry, are you saying Sport Council or CFSA?
He's saying someone at Sports
CFSA
Council.
from Sports Council.
They have representatives on Sports Council. It may in fact be one
So
of the
someone
same.
from Sports Council that represents those groups that are also in CFSA, but not someone from CFSA.
That's somebody from Ringette.
Okay, I move my objection.
Okay. And I'm going to say this because today is an incredibly long agenda.
Get this along.
We may need to be tidier with our comments, but we don't have to be quite as tidy right yet. We'll get there, I suspect. Anybody else? Seeing none. Is that everyone's comfortable with the accepting the invitation? Accepting the friendly amendment?
Modest change.
I see nothing. Okay, we're going to, and besides this isn't a motion, it's only a motion to receive. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
No, one more.
One more other item.
Item 5 first.
Last item on the agenda is
Richard.
Leigh Victoria Park Planning and
Me
Design.
down there too.
So moved.
Second.
I have one question on this one, and it might be an engineering question, but is it the intention to complete Darwin? Or is it road allowance that we have no intention of using?
Number 3 of which, road allowance, no intention of using. We may not even need it for pipes, but that's definitely using. The fronting road for New Park, the uncompleted fronting road is Toronto.
No.
So that road allowance is available for plant purposes.
Okay, and one last question. How did we end up with the name Toronto in Coquitlam? That just seems wrong. So have we anticipated the possibility of, are we in a silo, or we have anticipated the possibility that the unused road allowance could be added to the park rather than be left as a 60-foot wide blackberry brush?
We'll include that within the planning process or work with them, and we'll make sure that we're in consultation with the engineering operations, whether it's needed for utility corridors or other purposes. But we'll look at that opportunity for park development.
Not too often a member of council gets to add 15% to a park. I've got Brett.
Well, Thank you, Mayor, and that's something I looked at, and thank you for jumping on that. I appreciate it. It helps to add to the park. This is something I've been, I guess maybe 4 years now, I've been pushing for Leigh Park to be brought up. We now have development almost completely around the park, and I always like at Queenston to getting these parks in for the residents to avoid the conflicts that we may now have with people looking across at what they said, because Card and I talked before, there was no sign, we don't want a park, everyone does, or whatever. So, but when I look at the density of the housing that's come up in that area, with Victoria Park, and we're going to do some work there, but there's limited work that we can do at Victoria Park. It's a very small field for kids that are probably 10 and under for soccer. The baseball diamond is in rough shape. And even kids in baseball have to be about 10 and under to use that field. So it's going to be interesting to listen to planning on Leigh, on Victoria Park. Leigh, on the other hand, I would like to see it become, and for my suggestions on that, more of an active with either sports courts, lacrosse box, and I would like us to find a way with this, on this land, to level this land, to create a more flatter surface here. There may be some small bit of retaining walls along that edge between that and the school, but I think it would create a greater usable park space and create more activity, because we've got tremendous amount of houses. We talked about the need for daycares up there and the amount of young parents and kids that are up there. So we do need this type of active park in this area. So that's what I'm hoping for, that we will have facilities at Leigh Park that are different but an active component. I'm looking for your planning and consultation with the community on that. But I am so glad after 4 or 5 years of asking when we're going to get to Leigh Park that we're finally getting it here. Thank you.
And we're so glad you can stop nagging.
You haven't, but
Well, we now have 2 nags on council when it comes to Leigh Park and Victoria Park, and Councillor Asmans and I have talked about this at great length, and I think most of it we agree on. To me, Leigh Park, Victoria Park, and to an extent the school grounds there need to complement each other. This park, Leigh Park, touches on Leigh Elementary School, at least if we remove that road allowance, it does. To me, that's why it makes sense to take that road allowance out of there, because then it becomes an extension into the green space that's there. I want to see development there that complements what we already have on the mountain and what we already have in these parks. Leigh Elementary, through the work of the PAC there and a lot of volunteers over the years, has developed a pretty good playground system of apparatus and things. Victoria Park, not so much. We've had some corporate donations there. We've repurposed some equipment from other parks, and we've managed to, on fairly quick turnaround, put together a park, which was really needed by the residents in that area. And we've got a good start, but it's a tot lot. We don't have anything for a little more challenging for the older kids, and we don't have anything for the really older kids, and that's the teens, the young adults. I'd like to see possibly our first outdoor lacrosse box in the Northeast. Tennis is another natural for up in that area. And something that complements Victoria Park, because Victoria Park is one of the few level pieces of property we have up there. And to me, that has value in terms of the baseball that we could have there. So I would like to see, because it's almost right across the street, the other activities such as tennis and things where we can do some terracing and we can place them rather than using up the open space, because I think there's value to open space at Victoria Park. But at the same time, that's the one to me where we need a little more playground equipment, a couple of more benches there. And I think we want to move into some of those other amenities, and certainly sport courts come to mind. And yeah, I think I'm really happy to see this coming forward. I know that there'll be a lot of interest in the community as we move forward through the consultation process, and you know what, we have some really we have some great opportunities in these parks. And I know that the residents of Burke Mountain are eagerly awaiting more parks as they arrive on a daily. We see new people moving into the community, and a lot of people with young families, kids that are active and don't have the large yards that we have in other places in Coquitlam. And I think that's why open space and recreational opportunities are so important for the young families that are moving in there. Thank you.
You, Terry?
Yes, thanks. The green overlay on page 4 of the map obscures what I think is a pathway running from the northeast corner of the proposed park to the southwest corner. And actually on Google Earth, it's quite clear. And so in terms of if this ends up being terraced to create sports courts and things like this and with a large retaining wall, I'm not sure if that's going to end up, I think we should be sensitive to how people are using the area now. If that's a very well-used pedestrian or biking or just plain or transportation of some sort route, we should be sensitive to that so we don't all of a sudden block a whole bunch of routes off there. I'm sure you would be anyway, but I just wanted to draw your attention to that. Thank you very much. That's my only point.
That's it. Anybody else?
A lot of approval from me.
From the
One of
Burke Mountain
two
residents.
councils from Burke Mountain.
Outstanding. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Be sensitive.
You saying that's noticeable?
You just slide it over a little bit.
Where did it go?
That would be the,
They moved.
there you go. Yes. It's actually a service corridor.
Yeah.
That one, pipes, that's why it's been put in there.
Adjournment would be in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. See you all tonight. Those of you who are coming